Start the recording. So welcome everyone to our second session of the conference today on the shelters that we've been talking about earlier today around safe havens, but we're focusing on the work that's being done in Alberta. Alberta has been very progressive in the work that they've been doing addressing elder abuse prevention and safe and security for older adults. So today we are joined by two well-known experts in the field, Michele Markham and Joanne Blinco. Michele is a registered social worker and the manager of the Senior Safe House, a shelter for older adults needing safety from abuse. As part of her role, she participates on the management committee of the Seniors Protection Partnership, a collaborative intervention team that responds to high-risk abuse cases. Michele is a board member of both the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council and the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And she is joined by her colleague, Joanne Blinco, who is also a social worker with a BSW, with a focus on First Nations and feminist practice. She has worked for 30 years for the Ministry of Child and Family Service as a family outreach worker and child protection worker with an emphasis on rural and remote communities. She has done elder abuse case management in Lethbridge. She is currently the Assistant Executive Director, managing meetings with case managers, grant funding, partnerships, and the day-to-day operations of the organization. So we are in good hands to let us know what is really going on in Alberta. So I'm going to turn it over to Michele to begin the presentation.
Hi, thank you. I was struck by it being a bit of a oxymoron, Alberta being progressive, but that's just me. So I'm going to talk about the history of the Sage Senior Safe House and a bit about our shelter, and then turn it over to Joanne. So there had been a number of committees and discussions about elder abuse in Edmonton since 1988, with very few initiatives that provided actual resources to address the abuse. Social workers with the City of Edmonton were aware of this gap, and in 1995 began to work on the establishment of an elder abuse intervention team. In 1998, after years of advocating and planning, these social workers gained enough support to put an elder abuse intervention team in place. The team was comprised of a social worker with the City of Edmonton Community Services Department, a detective with Edmonton Police Service, and a seniors resource coordinator from Catholic Social Services. I'm just going to advance my slide to show you the timeline. So the seniors resource coordinator was from Catholic Social Services. The detective and that coordinator would primarily follow up on individual cases of elder abuse, while the city social worker's role was community development and public education initiatives. In the first
Michele?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask you just to slow down just a bit for the ASL interpreter.
Oh, sorry.
So
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Some of the words they have to do individually. So yeah. I apologize. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. So in the first 5 years that the intervention team was in existence, they responded to over 1,100 cases of elder abuse. Those cases proved to be very intensive and complex, and contributing to the complexity, as many of us know, was the involvement of adult children and other family members. In addition, a number of agencies and services were often involved with the older adult, providing support that was unrelated to the experience of abuse. Systemic barriers such as long waiting lists to access continuing care or supportive care facilities or affordable housing alternatives were identified as challenges to a quick, effective response to elder abuse. The experience of the elder abuse intervention team led some City of Edmonton social workers to contemplate the need for accommodation for abused older adults. When this was discussed, the question naturally arose regarding the use of existing shelter services for abused women, which our colleagues from Atira spoke about. Based on the experience of social workers, aligning with that experience in Vancouver, who had worked in the area of spousal violence, the number of older women in shelters was quite small. To confirm this experience that they had, they looked for studies done about shelter services by older adults, and surprisingly, there wasn't a lot to be found. But what they did find suggested that the existing shelters were not suitable to address the specific needs of abused older adults, and that relying on those shelters to provide safety just would not do, especially when talking about older men seeking safety. So the challenges, as has been spoken to earlier, the length of stay in domestic violence shelters, at least here in Alberta, is typically 21 days. That's not enough time to find appropriate housing or to deal with financial issues like transferring pension checks to different bank accounts. Second stage domestic violence shelters only accept women with their children. And older women struggle with different issues than younger women. As we know, there's health concerns, there's lengthier relationships, and often it's adult children who are perpetrating the harm. Older women also reported feelings of shame and embarrassment, in a sense that they stood out amongst the younger women in the domestic violence shelters. And there are few spaces for single women in those shelters as well. And of course, we already talked about how the men are not included. In Edmonton, there had been little documented demand for a unique housing service for abused older adults. There was, however, an acute awareness on the part of the social workers who had advocated for the elder abuse intervention team that something needed to be provided for those older adults who needed to leave their abusive relationships. Appropriate housing for those who chose to leave was a primary concern. In Calgary, and our colleague will talk about this later in the conference, a shelter specifically for abused older adults had opened, and there was some discussion of attempting a similar project here in Edmonton. Since it had taken 3 years of work to get the support to have the elder abuse intervention team in place, it was believed that the chances of getting a shelter for older adults was slim to non-existent. Interested parties determined other avenues would need to be explored. So the City of Edmonton Community Services Department social worker working on the elder abuse intervention team was involved in raising community awareness surrounding the issues faced by older adults in Edmonton and the concerns of the elder abuse intervention team in attempting to provide assistance. In particular, the social worker was interested in pursuing community action in the area of housing for abused seniors. Social workers in the City of Edmonton Community Services Department were and are oriented towards working in the community based on a community building approach. This is important to reference because it fundamentally affected the unfolding of events that led to Edmonton Seniors Safe Housing Pilot Project. This approach works from a strengths and capacity building perspective. Within the community development process, community members identified issues and strengths in the community, explore and understand those issues, and plan and develop community-based, community-driven, and community-controlled actions. Most importantly, social workers work with community members and other community organizations and groups in a collaborative, consultative, grassroots approach, which addresses the needs of the neighborhood or responds to an identified social issue, in this case, elder abuse. As concern grew for meeting the needs of older adults in abusive relationships, the social worker working within the community development model pulled together a selected group of retired professionals who had been actively involved in creating awareness on elder abuse. This group met with the social worker in June 1998 to plan a community meeting and a focus group of working or retired professionals and interested individuals. This meeting took place in the fall of 1998 and attendance was fantastic. People were engaged. Participants were asked to brainstorm ways that the community could directly or indirectly address elder abuse. The top 3 areas that they identified were public education, peer support, and then housing and shelters. This information provided further direction to the community development social worker on where to focus energy to move this complex and challenging issue forward. During this time period, the social worker had been also in contact with the president of the board of directors of a private senior subsidized apartment building, who had mentioned that the organization had been looking for ways to support community needs and issues that might be and that they might be interested in considering the apartment building as a place to accommodate seniors wishing to leave abusive relationships. The next step within the community development approach was to garner support from community agencies with interest and resources suitable to help the older adults. Ultimately, the community response would result in the formation of a steering committee and the creation of a 2-year pilot project called Edmonton Seniors Safe Housing. It must be emphasized that the formation of a steering committee was an intentional aspect of the planning process. As the members of the newly formed steering committee met to discuss the pilot project, the committee expanded. A preliminary needs assessment of potential clients led to a list of additional senior serving organizations. And then a letter of invitation was drafted and sent to these organizations as well as to other community agencies. The letter requested a donation of services required for safe housing, but also offered participation in the planning phase of the project for abused older adults and proposed membership on the steering committee. So engaging them to be part of the solution. As part of the planning stage, steering committee members created various operational processes. An overall aim was to ensure the service was comprehensive, well coordinated, and client focused. Since this project relied on the collaboration of existing resources in the community to provide this service, the time required to set up and improve these processes was significant. Any of us working in multi-organization collaboratives know that you need to pay attention to those pieces. During the first several months of this initiative, the steering committee members met weekly or bi-weekly. There was an ongoing review, revision, and refinement of processes that was critical to the successful operation of this unique model of service delivery. An evaluation committee was created and convened to develop an evaluation framework. Once a draft framework was developed, it was reviewed, discussed, and revised by the steering committee. Because the framework was viewed as a work in progress as opposed to a final document, it was reviewed several times throughout the pilot to allow for incorporation of relevant revisions based on new information. Even though the practical aspects of developing the pilot took precedence in the early phases, the evaluation was considered to be a valuable learning tool for the steering committee. As the steering committee met to begin the process of then designing a service to meet the needs of the older adults, it became evident that a number of important decisions needed to be worked through. The committee was using what they described as an organic model of development, meaning that they were designing the service from the bottom up rather than top down. And using this approach, the committee took ideas or suggestions, tested out the efficacy of an idea, and evolved the idea through extensive discussion and negotiation. So originally, the group met with the identified purpose of designing an emergency older adult housing service that would be accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week from a variety of referral sources. The reality of the resources available caused committee members to revisit this aspect of service provision. The housing provider had 2 suites at that time. They had 2 suites that were available, and there was a possibility they might both be occupied at the same time when another client came forward. The other issue, after hours and weekend access, were problematic. With the decision made that the service would not be crisis oriented, one of the main challenges was to map out options that could respond to a wide variety of client needs, which might occur in the off hours. The committee spent a great amount of time and effort to plan what these options could look like, or identify them as well. The committee invited what was then called Alberta Human Resources and Employment, a ministry of the government of Alberta, to participate. And this ministry was offered to provide access to hotel accommodation to after hours clients until they could access the safe housing service. So that's the first piece of the Alberta government getting involved. Due to safety and security issues, the steering committee came to the conclusion that the service design should focus on safe housing as opposed to emergency shelter. The need to adjust the committee's conceptualization to fit reality or what was doable in the community would surface several times during the development of the pilot. Through negotiation, members were able to come to agreement that given the community setting, they would put in place the best security features available with the resources they had. To that end, they discussed the need for client confidentiality, of course, unpublished phone numbers, special door locks with keys that could not be duplicated, police conversations with other tenants in the building, and client connection to a Lifeline Help Me I've Fallen service. Discussions then revolved around the risk assessment and development of a screening tool to identify clients where the risk to the client and to other tenants was too high to be in a suite in a community setting. Entry to the safe housing service was determined by a thorough screening process. To aid in decision-making, an assessment tool was developed by a subcommittee of the steering committee. The tool developed also served as an intake form and was used for every instance where the caller was a potential client to any of the partners. The assessment process determined, among other things, whether or not the senior needed to leave their current accommodation where they were, and the degree of physical risk for both the older adult as well as the other tenants in the senior's facility. The steering committee determined that older adults whose own physical risk and safety is high, and there's a possible endangerment to others, they would be referred to a more secure settings, such as, if appropriate, that they're women's shelter, or down to Calgary's Kirby Rotary House shelter. In keeping with the action orientation of the evaluation component of the service, the risk assessment form was revised as necessary based on suggestions from those who used it. So it was an active iterative process. As the committee came closer to service provision, concern emerged for the emotional needs of the clients once they were living in the safe suites. The committee was working diligently to have the service operating, but members agreed that to house a client without adequate emotional support could create harm. In discussing the client's emotional needs, members gradually came to believe that an extensive case management model was required. And then that was the decision to have in place a coordinator who would work with and support the older adults in those safe spaces. Grant applications were then prepared and submitted to a variety of local funding sources. And in May of 2000, the Muttart Foundation granted the steering committee funds to operate a pilot service from May 2000 to May 2002. One suite was secured in the nonprofit affordable housing. There had been a bit of a boom and lack of availability, so they only had one suite when rubber hit the road, if you so to speak. So the manager was part of the steering committee. A project coordinator was hired to work during the day for 3.5 days per week. And it was agreed the coordinator would provide the support and practical assistance to the safe housing residents once they were in that suite. So that's the background of how the safe house came to be. I am going to move my slides. So how do we look now? The Sage Senior Safe House, we are now 7 suites in a seniors affordable housing building. We are on a secure floor. People can't come in and go as, without the fobs, which all our older adults have. We are still not staffed 24/7. Food is brought in. All the suites are self-contained. If people want to cook, they can go ahead and cook, buy their own food, do what they need to do to be safe. They have to be able to keep the place safe, meaning they cannot invite the person who harmed them into the shelter. We are considered low barriered. If somebody likes to have 6 beers at the end of the day, every day, true story, that's okay, as long as they're maintaining the safety of the shelter. They're not running up and down the hall, banging on people's doors at 3 in the morning, going to the bar around the corner and bringing home strangers. Not okay, then they're not keeping the shelter safe. And most importantly, they're older adults who need the safety of the shelter. Right now, as mentioned, Edmonton, like the rest of Canada, is in a housing crisis. We are typically a 60-day stay shelter, but that is going well beyond right now. And yeah, so that is us. I'm going to turn it over to Joanne. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll just share my screen. Perfect. So just, Laura, everything looks okay? You can see my screen appropriately?
If, sorry, Joanne, if you just go up to the top to the display settings and just click that button that we did before, that would be great.
Up on top here?
The one that says display settings and then switch the view. If not, this will work. If not, oh, you
Try
just,
one more time. Yeah. Sorry about that.
that's okay.
Any better?
No,
you
Joanne,
just-
so if you just go to that middle setting at the top left-hand corner where it says display settings, that
sorry.
in the middle, no. Display settings right in the middle there.
And so I can't see it on my
Oh,
That's,
okay.
you know, oh, I was just gonna say it's fine because we can still see the PowerPoint, so just proceed.
PowerPoint. Okay,
The
Just
joy of
do-
technology.
Jeff, just do what you just had. It's
let's
fine.
go. Okay, perfect.
That's fine.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Joanne.
Okay. So my name is Joanne Blinco. I'm the Executive Director for the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. And with me today is Elizabeth Lee. She's our Education Coordinator for the Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. What we'll start with is just giving you a background on the council. So we're a province-wide network of professionals, and we represent with our membership, communities across the province. Our work has focused on promoting the well-being and security of older adults, and like other agencies across the province, working to increase community awareness about what elder abuse is. We have developed resources to address and educate elder abuse. So we have our Staying Safe handbook, which if you check out the website, you'll be able to see that we have a handbook that assists older adults to navigate the process if they're in a situation of elder abuse. And I think one of our foundational beliefs is that we support community response to elder abuse. We know that the community knows their communities best. Before we get into looking at the safe spaces, what we're going to look at is our coordinated community response teams and our case managers. That will give you some foundational information about who is supporting those safe spaces in Alberta. So in 2014, the government set out to create coordinated community response teams. And across Alberta, they funded 30 different communities between the years of 2015 to 2018. So a CCR model from an Alberta lens is a group of organizations, service providers, all coming together to achieve that goal of addressing collectively elder abuse and working to increase the safety and security of older adults across Alberta. Coordinated community responses at that time had a coordinator that would build and provide service resources and coordination amongst the team that they were required to build. The team was, or the CCR group was a group of people who addressed elder abuse at either a community or a regional level. So again, it goes back to there were 30 CCRs across the province of Alberta looking to come collectively together to address the issue of elder abuse. So the CCRs across Alberta now can be made up of a variety of different community agencies, service providers. So we look at AHS Home Care, senior serving agencies, police, victim services units, social workers, financial institutions, senior centers, churches. What they're doing is they're drawing from the needs of those communities. And as the next point looks at is making sure that it's unique to each one of those communities. We know from a rural and a remote perspective or an Indigenous perspective, those communities look different. So it was not prescribed what a CCR was going to be, but rather we saw, as Michele used the word, the grassroots, the build from the foundation to build it from the foundation up. And again, the CCRs were really focused on the older adult determines what services they are going to need. So yes, we have access to those variety of services, but the older adult is determining what is most useful for them in that collective response. In 2021, we were able at that time to get funding from Seniors and Community Social Services. And so what it did is it built on the 2015 to 2018 grant funding, having that coordinator already have established that CCR network. Now we were able to bring in a case manager. So the role of that case manager was to lead the elder abuse as the pinpoint or the primary person to stay in the lane of elder abuse with that wraparound support of all of those other community agencies that had been previously established. We know that communities understand communities best. So that's where the case managers with their coordinated community response teams were able to support elder abuse collectively. And again, case managers walk alongside of the older adult, providing those supports that the older adult sees they may request. So if there's a CCR response, that doesn't mean that each one of those members might become involved. What it does mean is, for example, if the older adult has got a situation where there's financial concern, then they may tap into the financial people through banking, through some counseling services, whatever the older adult is deeming that they need as support. So it's just this year that our Safe Spaces program started to be developed. It was in conjunction with the Ministry of Seniors and Community Social Services and the Government of Alberta. And the focus of the Safe Suites is to use existing infrastructure. So local seniors housing providers to support seniors in the need of a safe space through available lodges. So again, going back to our belief system about community knows community best, in each community, they have the ability to develop what that safe suite is going to look like, who they're going to get for support, where they're going to get that. All of that is built with the case manager and their coordinated community response team collectively bringing that together. Going back in 2016, Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network had originally piloted and put in place the use of safe suites, they called it at that time. So in 2016, there was an elder abuse case manager, and what they had noticed is they needed a safe seniors-friendly accommodation to support seniors who might be at risk of abuse or in a situation of abuse. So Learn approached the city of Lethbridge to see if they could get funding that would provide crisis stabilizations for seniors. Then they approached Green Acres, which is one of our local foundations in housing, requesting within the lodge suites that could facilitate an older adult coming into that lodge for a period of time to be able to deal with some of the things that were happening in the situation where there was someone that was causing them harm. So in 2018, that was the first time that an older adult was placed at a housing home by a Learn staff. I had at that time the privilege of being the case manager, so had the opportunity to invite an older adult to see if they would be interested in going into a lodge suite. And they were able to be housed with supports along the way. And that's where we'll get into some of that information. Safe spaces will be implemented now in communities that have an active. So when I explained that there were CCRs established between 2015 and 2018, and then 2021, there was an introduction of a case managers. So in order to have a safe suite in Alberta, you need to have an active CCR and a case managers. So seniors will be referred to these safe spaces by their local case managers. The Ministry of Seniors and Community Social Services is funding this initiative, this support, where those lodge spaces will be available in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. And earlier in this year, we had a call for proposals, so we're working on the details of that. And what happened is the case manager, as part of that proposal, would resource the lodges in their community or their region to see if there could be a lodge that would support seniors coming in there, excuse me, and that it wouldn't then be a hardship for the older adult. The case manager and the CCR partners then provide, excuse me, ongoing support. So before, during, and after the stay in the safe suite. The case managers and the older adults will work together in determining the next steps. Excuse me. The other thing that we found in that learn model was that there needed to be some level of mediation for the older adults and the person who was causing harm. So that now has been implemented. So what we've learned is the safe spaces provides opportunity for their older adult to have time away from the environment that they were a part of, for them to sort out the things that they are seeing as issues in their current situation, and to be lodged with other seniors. This is not necessarily a term stay, because the senior, after the 90 days, could choose this as an option to be their permanent housing plan. So when they walk into the lodge, the opportunity there is not others in crisis, but what it is a community of support. So someone could have been living in that lodge for 10 years, and what they're finding is shared lived experiences of others in the lodge. The other thing that we found is sometimes when they were in their own home or sharing accommodation with the alleged offender, they didn't necessarily have access to some of those community resources. So the CCR network, so for example, home care that might have not come to the home previously would be able to come to the lodge and provide information around hearing aids or glasses, whatever that piece. Those CCR members now can access and have an opportunity to meet with the older adult in a lodge setting. What we're looking at this being is an immediate placement. And what happens is when the older adult makes the decision, yes, I would like to move into the lodge for this respite period of time, they fill out an application for housing when they arrive. So again, they're taking the lead on their choosing to come into the lodge, into that setting. The things that we have found is that when they're at the lodge, they have access to recreational activities and outings where they might have not before. They have meals that are collective and provided. They have light housekeeping. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, is they have access to those medical needs that a lodge also does provide. So when you look at handrails or wheelchair accessible, whatever the facility has already got in place, the access for those older adults is important. Home care comes to the lodge, and at the end of that 90-day period, they have a choice to stay at the lodge, return home, or find other housing. If they choose to stay, they will remain in that same safe environment. One of the things that we have taken is when they go into the lodge, there's no identifying information that says they've gone to the lodge. We ask that confidentiality around that they're in the lodge, that is not being disclosed to the person who has caused harm. That's not information that is shared, which assists with the issue of safety. As I said, there has been a call for proposals around CCRs across the province. We're in the process right now developing policies, and we're doing that with the Safe Spaces Navigator, who's a part of our Alberta Elder Abuse Awareness Council. And it's tapping into people like Michele, who from SAGE and their experience, and tapping into Unison out of Calgary, who also run the 2 elder abuse shelters. So we've been able to focus on those different levels. The shelters provide that higher degree of security. We're looking at more of a lower level of intervention where the degree of risk is much lower than in those 2 shelters. So accessing the safe suites is about to be underway shortly. Like I said, the call for proposals has gone out. We're working with communities to put that into place. And that just kind of gives you an overview of the safe spaces in Alberta. So thank you for listening to that presentation.
Great, thank you so much. That was quite detailed about all the programs that you have to offer. And we have a few minutes just for some questions that have come in for both of you. Laura, do you want to post some of the questions that you've been looking at?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was having my, some thunderstorms are rolling through here, so things were getting a little bit shaky, but here I am and I'm happy. Okay, so we have a couple really great questions. And the first one is, do the CCRs still have coordinators?
So the answer is no. So in 2015 to 2018, the coordinators were put in place to establish and put in place that CCR network. In 2021, we got grant funding to place a case manager at the helm of the hub of providing services. So now the case manager is the one who's providing those services in conjunction with the CCRs.
Okay. Next great question for Joanne. How does Safe Space deal with cases of abuse when the older person has dementia? How does that change the options, and are there options?
Again, part of that work will be looking to see if we can get some form of assessment. When somebody comes into a safe suite, the lodges have a level or an expectation of capability. So they must be at an SL2 level. So if there's dementia and that has caused an inability to care for themselves, they may not be able to enter the safe suites. We do ask them to have the ability to manage and function on their own within that. So I think we've gone as high as an SL3 as the possibility, but we do keep it that they are independent and capable of doing those things.
Yeah. And a question for Michele. Do you currently have a wait list with the Edmonton Senior Shelter?
We do. The only time we haven't had a wait list during my 9 years here was a little bit during COVID. I also didn't mention, so while it started out with the Alberta government providing support and access to hotel with the pilot phase, now we are fully funded by the Alberta government, and in November they added funding to allow for, because we're always full, for 4 additional transition suites in a separate location in a lodge type setting. So we do have the ability to house 11 people, or if there's couples, because we will take couples as well as men, it could be 12.
That's such great news to hear. Alberta just keeps moving leaps and
know.
bounds.
It's amazing.
The best of the West, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Joanne, I have one more question for you. So the individual is saying, if you have time to speak, can you please explain how our SCSP system in Lethbridge supports Learn post-crisis?
So one of the pieces of coming out of Lethbridge is that what we had built at that period of time is the case manager manages the lane of elder abuse. And part of the supports that came from that other network, that is a network of supports here in Lethbridge, is an outreach component. So if there's additional services that were required, there was a response that could be provided, and that gave the elder abuse case manager opportunity to move and work with another older adult. And if there was issues of housing or medical appointments, that team of outreach workers that was collective here, or is collective here in Lethbridge, was able to support the older adult as well. So it wasn't just my opportunity as the elder abuse person, but there was other agencies like housing and Canadian Mental Health that were able to provide that kind of support to the older adult, as well as the coordinated community response teams.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, we've come to the conclusion of our webinar today. You've offered a wealth of information for everyone to learn, and ideally carbon copy province to province and territory to territory, because Alberta's been doing some great things. I'm a little bit biased. As I told Joanne, I worked on the elder abuse intervention team almost 2 decades ago. So that's old knowledge now.
That's exciting.
Yes. So I took many trips to the Edmonton Safe House with many of my clientele, and it was a valuable support for the seniors that I supported leaving very abusive situations. So again, ladies, thank you very much for your expertise and knowledge. And everyone will go over to our sessions in the feed loop. Take care. Have a wonderful day. Bye.